Well, back when I was in my mid-20s, and of course a lot smarter than I am right now because back then I knew everything, I got awareness of the fact that the doctrine of the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist was a major stumbling block between us and our Protestant brothers and sisters. For the overwhelming majority of them, it was absolutely a deal breaker. And my brilliant idea was, if it's such a problem, if it's such an obstacle, why don't we just drop it? I mean, why don't we just drop the whole thing? Because it's not really that important, right? It's not that big a deal. And in the interests of all of us just kind of, getting along and getting forward, maybe we should just forget the whole thing and move on, right? In a lifetime of being wrong, and often spectacularly wrong, that bit of stupidity deserves its own dishonorable mention. That brilliant 20-something was blissfully unaware of the fact that the church for 20 centuries had built her entire existence on the foundation of the Eucharist. Was totally ignorant of the fact that while I was learning to read, the fathers of Vatican II were writing that the Eucharist is the source and summit of the Christian life. The source and summit, the beginning and the end, the origin, the foundation, the wellspring, the summit, the goal, the object, the end game, the destination. Everything we do, everything, every sacrament, every teaching, everything we believe, everything we preach, everything we are, ultimately ties back to the Eucharist. It is all grounded in foundation in that Eucharist. As one apologist put it, the Eucharist is not just something that we do. It's the only thing that we do. And yet, perhaps the mistake of that brilliant 20-something is not that uncommon, because there are all kinds of surveys and polls and opinion pieces that have looked at self-identified Catholics and found that a substantial number, maybe even an alarming number, do not believe in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. They don't believe that it changes. It just stays bread and wine. It's just a symbol. Including a substantial fraction of people who come to Mass every Sunday and receive the Eucharist, but are doubtful and skeptical about exactly what it is that is in their hands. But if that's true, if that's how it is, if it's just a symbol, if it's just bread and wine, then there's a problem. Because what that would mean is when we adore the Eucharist, when we worship Eucharist, we're worshiping bread. We're worshiping bread, which is idolatry, right? Idolatry is worshiping something as God that isn't God. And if we're worshiping bread as if it were God, then that's idolatry. In fact, it's not just idolatry, it's stupidity. What kind of stupid people worship as God these little circles of bread that they make for themselves? And if the Eucharist is somehow the foundation, the source and summit of everything we do, but that is just a lie, that is just a huge big mistake, then the entire church is just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. It's all founded on rubble. Everything we do is corrupted, is somehow tainted by that idolatry. Everything we do is ultimately, in its origin, false. And that means we just need to shut this whole thing down, right? We just all need to march out the door, last one out, lock behind you, and let the whole thing just collapse like the house of cards that it is. But if it's true, if what happens at this altar really is what we say happens, then that means the church is the most important institution in the entire world. And you notice that it's one or the other. It's one or the other. It's either pagan idolatry or source and summit. There's no in between. There's no middle ground for you to stake your flag. You got to pick one or the other, and then you got to go with it. So if you're one of those people who has doubts or questions or skepticism or frankly disbelief about what we say is happening here, please, I beg you, get hold of me. Find me, call me, write me, email me, trip me as I'm walking by, get my attention. I have done Eucharistic programs at this parish many times before, and I will do them again. I will meet with any group. I will meet with any family. I will meet with any individual, one-on-one, to talk about why it is that we believe this incredible, frankly, ridiculous thing and why it's so desperately important. But for now, maybe you, like that brilliant 20-something, are a little skeptical about, is it really that important that I need to invest any more time digging into it? And do I really want to spend time with Dcn Nick, who seems to be way too worked up about all this? So let me just give you one reason why it really is not just some abstract sort of pie-in-the-sky kind of thing, that it really is central and important to the way you live your life every single day. Why it's critically important. And it has to do with something that you're about to say, that we're all about to say when we say the creed together in just a few minutes. The last sentence of the creed is, I look forward to the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. That's what you're going to say. And I hope you believe it because you say you do. But what kind of eternal life do you look forward to? What exactly are you looking forward to? Is it eternal spiritual life? That your spirit, that your soul will shake off this mortal coil and go and live forever in heaven with God? Is it a spiritual eternal life? Because if that's what it is, then obviously spiritual things is what you will want to cultivate in this life in order to prepare for that eternal spiritual life, right? Scriptures and prayer and, communion and fellowship and love with family and with friends, deep meditation and union with God, those kinds of spiritual things are what you would want to cultivate if you're looking forward to a spiritual eternal life. But that's not what you say. That's not what you're saying. You say, I look forward to the resurrection of the dead. That this body, this thing here is going to rise up out of the grave and never die again. That you will live forever as a total human being, body and soul. That's what you say you look forward to. But how is that supposed to happen? I can't do it. I can't raise myself up from the dead. I know none of us can. How is that supposed to happen? If spiritual things are what we cultivate in order to have a spiritual eternal life, then wouldn't it make sense that we would need physical things that have eternal life in them in order to receive that eternal life? And we can't do it for ourselves. Somebody has to bring it to us from the outside. Somehow we have to take into ourselves physically the eternal life that we say that we believe into our bodies. If you are what you eat, and I'm a doctor, so I can tell you, it's true, you are what you eat, then if you want eternal life physically, somehow you have to eat eternal life. And that's what happens. That's what happens at this altar. The one who has eternal life, the one who rose from the grave and will never die again, he gives us his eternal life in his flesh and blood to share, to feed us, to nourish us, to grow the eternal physical life that we say we look forward to. That's why Jesus says, right after the feeding of the multitude that we just heard about, that's why he can say in John's Gospel, if you want to go check it out, whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood will have eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. He's not just making a promise. He is. He's making a promise. But that's not all. He's explaining how it works. The eternal life that I have in my flesh and blood, he says, I will give to you so that you can take that eternal life physically into your flesh and blood and share it with me. And I will complete that process when I raise you up on the last day. That's what he's explaining. That's what happens every time you come up these aisles to receive Holy Communion. You are taking the physical, eternal life of the one who has it to give and bringing it into yourself so that bit by bit you will also have that physical, eternal life. Of course, as you might expect, the Catechism says it a whole lot better and more concisely than I have. Every time this mystery is celebrated, the work of our redemption is carried on, and we break the one bread that provides the medicine of immortality, the antidote for death, and the food that makes us live forever in Jesus Christ. And that's why the real presence of Christ is fundamental, important to you. It's not just some abstraction. It's not just some take it or leave it idea. It is absolutely central. It is absolutely the source and summit, if you will, of your hope for eternal life. Over the course of the centuries, one image that has been cultivated of the church is as a ship. A ship, no doubt you've seen in other churches, all this nautical imagery of boats and sails and anchors and that kind of stuff. And the idea is that the church is a ship. The church is this grand, immense ship, and we're all on that ship together. And we're sailing through life together. We're navigating through the places together, and this is our safe place. This is our safe haven while we're navigating not just through the calm waters, but especially through the storms. The church is our ship. And if that model appeals to you, if that image kind of does it for you, it certainly has to occur to you that the old girl has fallen on some hard times recently. The glory is looking just a little bit faded. A lot of the furnishings and the appointments on the ship are kind of threadbare and worn and tatty. The entertainment is, frankly, far too often second-rate. Half the stuff on the ship is broken or missing or just lost. Quite a lot of the crew are in an active state of mutiny. Far too many of the officers are incompetents that need to be court-martialed. The whole thing needs about 10 coats of marine paint from top to bottom. And you know people who've gone on to other ships, smaller ships, newer ships, nicer, cleaner, a lot more attractive, better entertainment, better food, better fellow passengers to mingle with, more inviting than that ancient ship of faded glory. Hold of that ship, treasure beyond belief. The cargo that ship carries is the most amazing, most beautiful treasure. Beautiful, radiant, spectacular, powerful, limitless quantities, enough for absolutely everyone in the hold of that ship. And somehow, despite it all, that ship still carries that precious cargo, clean and pure and unspoiled. That's the rumor. That's what people are saying. Not everybody believes it. It's too good to be true. It's too good to be believed. But when you're standing on the deck of the shipwreck, the sinking, catastrophic disaster of the world, and you're ready to fling yourself into the water and swim for your life, that's the ship you're headed for. That's where you go. Because you know that cargo means that's the ship that gives you the best chance, the best hope of safety and security and salvation and life. That ship is where you are right now. This is where you belong. This is your home. This is your family. This is that ancient ship that somehow, beyond all the odds, is still afloat and still sailing on course. Now it's time for us all to go down to the galley and share together around the table that precious, precious cargo that ship still somehow carries, the bread of eternal life.